everybody, and welcome back to another Climb in the Ranks. And oh, whoops, daisy. So I made the video last night, went to bed, woke up this morning, read the comments, and went, oh crap, I'm such a potato. I screwed up. I actually thought it was tiers 5 to 7 for all the ranks, and I actually kind of know why I made that mistake. I think earlier on when ranked was first announced, one of the other community contributors that I'm in a Skype group with kind of said, oh, new rank season is going to be tiers 5 to 7. And then, of course, I go on my live account, and I have like 18 stars waiting for me. So I started at, I think, like rank 15, I think, or something like that. So I didn't even realize that the lower ranks weren't tiers 6 and 7, but were instead tiers 5 and 6. So, of course, because that is the case, and because the last video I addressed is mostly for ranks 15 to 1, I sort of have to redo the list for the lower tiers, so, for the lower ranks, sorry. So here I am, gonna go over all the ships in the same format, S tier down to C tiers and then trash tiers, and I'm gonna go over all the tier 5 and 6 ships to see which ones are viable and which ones aren't. So of course, let's start at S tier, and first up, it's the New Mexico. And the New Mexico does fine if you're only facing tier 5 and 6 ships. Phenomenal numbers of shells, check. Excellent firepower, so fantastic. Has the armor to boot, yep. Has a pretty sizable HP pool, yep. AA is kind of okay, it's not fantastic, but it's okay. Maneuverability is still an issue. I mean, she is a US battleship, slow, but very agile. But overall, definitely an S tier battleship. Yesterday, if you watched the other video, you probably realized that I put the Fuso a little bit below the New Mexico, but that was only if the Fuso ran into tier 7s. And since when you're going from rank 22 to 16 and you're not running into tier 7s, the Fuso is right up there with the New Mexico as well in the S tier. And where's my Fuso? Here it is. Fuso, she's still very, very good if you're not running to tier 7s. Her armor is sufficient for tier 6. Firepower is excellent, and the thing that she has over the New Mexico is the fact that she is fast. 24.5 knots means she can actually get around and keep up with some of the other ships in your fleet. The issue I find mainly with the Fuso, high detectability, so you will struggle a bit there. But again, if you have a 15-point cap and you're a concealment expert, the Fuso is pretty good there as well. So both the New Mexico and the Fuso are the S tier battleships. In terms of cruisers, and there's a good choice here with one, the Budyonny, because if the Budyonny does perfectly fine when you're talking about tier 7 battles, then of course when you're dealing with tier 5-6 battles, she will do absolutely fine as well. Great guns, terrific arcs, nice and fast, reasonably agile, bit high on the concealment, but not super huge of an issue. Mostly it's going to be her guns to stay a little bit of range and just setting everything on fire, because Russian cruiser with the vodka-laced shells, everything burns, and they burn some more. Keeping company with the Budyonny up at the S tier is actually the Cleveland. Again, like I mentioned yesterday, Cleveland is really a tier 8 ship down at tier 6. She's got tier 8 AA, essentially, and so firepower phenomenal. Her guns, yes, I know the arcs aren't very good, but when you consider that the majority of maps, minus ocean, you can hide behind islands, the arcs are an advantage. You'll be able to lob things over islands while remaining relatively safe. Also helps that the Cleveland has basically tier 7 heavy cruiser HP pool, and that she's got pretty solid armor, and of course she's hard to citadel as well. So for me, Cleveland, another one of the S tier cruisers. Forgot to mention the other Russian cruiser. It is a premium, so not everybody's gonna have access to her. The Molotov. Molotov, good tier 6 cruiser, very, very good, mainly because tier 980mm guns. You will be able to set a lot of fires, and you can definitely deal with all the other lower tier cruisers. Again, Molotov up at S tier because you're not facing tier 7 ships. You're facing mostly tier 5 and 6, and at that kind of tier, she will absolutely wreck things. Moving on to destroyers, well, there's a couple of choices here. The Anshan is good. Again, she's totally viable when it comes to tier 7 battles. So the low rank, she does absolutely fine. And of course, keeping company with the Anshan, for many of the same reasons, is actually the Gremyashy. They share The same kind of guns. They share similar torpedoes, although the Anshan's torps are a bit faster, so slight edge to the Anshan there. They're both really, really fast ships, pretty agile, good stealth. So Gremyashy, Anshan, both up here in the S tier for destroyers. Oh, and I forgot the one other destroyer. This one is an interesting destroyer, Farragut. The reason why she's up here is because if you have to have a destroyer that can cap and also be sort of annoying to bigger ships, the Farragut can definitely do that role. And mostly because the fact that she can contest caps effectively, because in the event that she runs into another destroyer, she can engage them with her guns and win, that she is so high up in the table. Otherwise, she would have probably fallen a bit lower had her guns actually been weaker. Torpedoes, not amazing, but she does have, I think her fully upgraded torps are like 6.4 kilometer torps, and they are okay in terms of range. You don't have to be like super, super close, like let's say the Gnevy, which is, I'm not a huge fan of that one. But the Farragut has semi-usable torpedoes, and she's got pretty solid guns, and and she can take caps. So up there in the S tier. And if I have to pick one CV to be up here at S tier, I'd have to pick the Ryujo. I think the Ryujo is the most flexible of all of the carriers. Her planes are okay, and she does have a pretty large hangar. So in terms of tier 5 and 6 carriers, the only one would be the Ryujo up at the S tier. All right, moving down to the A tiers. First up, the Battleship and the Warspite. Warspite, I think, is a good A tier battleship. Very, very solid guns. They turn really, really slow, though. Speed is okay. Her secondary armament's pretty good. Her HP pool is okay, but she is a bit soft. I do find the Warspite soft. She does take quite a lot of penetration damage, and not only that, but when it comes to dealing with, like, let's say, HE and fires, the fact that her damage control party is very, very short kind of hurts her. She does have a pretty good repair kit, but still, I don't think that puts her up nearly at the same level as the New Mexico or the Fuso. So for me, Warspite, still very, very good choice, but an A tier ship. The only other battleship I think that rightfully takes its place up in the A tier is actually this Kongo. Yep, a tier 5 battleship. I feel like the Kongo does fine as an A tier battleship. And mostly because the Kongo, even though her armor isn't amazing, it's workable. Her HP pool is pretty good. Her guns are really good. Japanese 356mm guns are very, very good. They do solid damage. But I think what sets the Kongo apart from all the other battleships is the fact that she is able to zip around at 30 knots. That's right. If your cruisers run off, the Kongo really can keep pace with them and support them, much in the way that a battle cruiser would. And so in the event that your cruisers run to other cruisers, the Kongo will be there to help out. And so because of that, Kongo sits up at the A tier as well in terms of battleships. Next, we move on to the cruisers, and I think the Aoba is an A tier cruiser. And the only reason I put the Aoba up here is the fact that I've always found her a bit fragile, and especially when I think you're dealing with New Mexicos and Fusos, where there are a lot of shells potentially to be flung in your direction, the Aoba is not fantastic at potentially resisting it. She is a reasonably maneuverable ship. She can dodge and weave, and she does have absolutely phenomenal guns. Japanese shells do love to set fires. So very, very good ship. Rate of fire is also really good, 11 seconds on 203mm guns, so very, very good ship overall, but just a little bit vulnerable, a little bit too vulnerable in my opinion, to the battleships on the S tier, like the New Mexico and the Fuso. Lots of shells are generally not an Aoba's friend. And then, of course, the Furutaka, but only the Sea Hull Furutaka, because the Sea Hull Furutaka is really an Aoba, well, sort of. They are generally very similar. The same number of guns, both 203mm caliber. Oh, and by the way, the Aoba and the Furutaka are both very good at dealing with, let's say, potential other cruisers or destroyers. So in that way, they're still very good ships. Furutaka, Sea Hull, good torpedoes, good guns, pretty decent maneuverability, good concealment. Just a very, very good ship overall. But again, the same sort of vulnerability to New Mexicos and Fusos. So, A-tier cruiser. A slightly maybe unconventional choice, Kirov as an A tier. Mostly because the Kirovs have a great range on their guns, fantastic arcs, and as long as you can lead somewhat, you should be able to hit targets. And they have very, very, very good fire chance on these 180 millimeter guns. And the thing is about the Kirov, and it's an A tier ship because individually, if you play it right, it's a pretty strong ship. But if you play, let's say, with other tier 5 and 6 ships, and you have like 2 or 3 Kirovs, and they all play together as a bit of a team, a little bit as a team, and they all sort of focus targets, it hurts a lot. I mean, they can stay at a range where it's hard to hit them, and they can just drop HE after HE after HE shot on you, and it's just a lot of damage. They are still, much like the Aoba and Furutaka, pretty vulnerable to New Mexico Fusos, not a lot of armor, and even more so the Kirov, the ship is a bit more sluggish in terms of her turning circle radius, so still very good ship if played correctly, but I would say, yeah, an A tier at the most. And then, of course, got to talk about destroyers, and I think if you talk outside of the sort of the gumbo destroyers like the Gremyashy, the Farragut, the Anshan, the Minekaze is still pretty good. Namely because, again, you're dealing with tier 5 and 6 battleships, and she is capable of launching a lot of torpedoes and actually killing things. And the main reason I think the Minekaze and not the other similar ships being up at the A tier is because the Minekaze is reasonably fast. She goes 39 knots, which is very, very good for speed. Her guns are terrible, but you're not really going to be using the guns too much, a little bit here and there. But mostly the advantage lies in the fact that, unlike the Mutsuki, she reloads torpedoes really, really quickly. And so that's the Minekaze's edge. So she's fast, stealthy, and can pop out a lot of torpedoes. So this giving her an A tier slot. Moving down to the B tiers. Okay, so B tiers, I would say both the Texas, even though Texas is sort of like B+, and the New York are down here at the B tiers. They're okay ships. Their firepower is really good. If they hit stuff with their guns, they will still hurt. And for the Texas, the AA is absolutely god tier when you're dealing with tier 5 and 6 CVs. But again, my problem is if you have to fight other battleships like the New Mexico, the Fuso, the Warspite, the Kongo, they can all overmatch your bow armor. And so the Texas and the New York both suffer the same problem there, and I just don't think they're all that great. And of course, they also have the funky gun arc, so they can't always get all their guns into action. So both of these ships down at the B tiers. Then we have, of course, the Murmansk, which is like, the Murmansk, I mean, what can you say about her? She's an Omaha variant, and like many of the other Omahas, she will be at this tier. Fragile ships can really get wrecked by things like Aobas, the Furutaka Sea Hulls. They can get wrecked by Budyonnys and Cleveland's and, of course, New Mexico's and Fuso and stuff like that. But they can still be viable because, well, they have this nice little forward gun arrangement where if you just point your bow in and you just put these guns towards the enemy, that is still 6 rapid fire 152 millimeter guns that can still set fires and be an annoying pest of a ship. So she's okay, but B tier, not always going to be top of her class, but usable from time to time. Going back to the Furutaka, because remember I did say Furutaka Sea Hull specifically, Furutaka AB hulls, I think, are going to be, where is this Furutaka? Here she is. If you're using the AB hulls, which means you don't have the duals and it's all the single 203 millimeter guns, then the Furutaka will be down here as well in the B tier. She's still got, reasonably workable armor, much like the Murmansk and stuff like that, workable. She does have good torpedoes. Her guns can do some pretty solid damage and everything, but the AB hulls have sort of very awkward turret traverse, very awkward sort of gun angles at times. So overall, not that great, but still workable. And then, of course, we talk about the other Minekaze variants, and we're talking about the Fujin, the Kamikaze R. These destroyers, I think, are going to be B tier for the main reason that they're just a bit slower than the Minekaze. And for these kinds of destroyers, you really need to be fast, because especially when you're running into destroyers like the Anshan, for example, where it'll go 38 knots and it's a gunboat, or something like a Gremyashy that goes 37 knots, again a gunboat. You need to be able to run away, and the Minekaze is definitely capable of doing that, while the Fujin, the Kamikaze R, might struggle a bit to get away from something like an Anshan, and even a Gremyashy, they'll struggle to get away from it. So I would say for these other Minekaze-esque destroyers, they're going to be down here at the B tiers as well. Then, of course, you've got the Nicolas. Nicolas is kind of an interesting ship. She's a big destroyer. Got guns that are pretty good and can definitely deal with the sort of enemy destroyers that she'll run into, but her detectability is a bit high. She does have interesting torpedo layout where, you know, you've got torpedoes on both sides, and that can be very good when you're trying to ambush certain ships or when you mess up your first torpedo salvo. She can turn around and lay another one. That's something that other destroyers can do. So Nicolas, I think, is okay. B tier is about where I would put her. In terms of other carriers, I think the Zuiho is a B tier carrier. If you're running up against other tier 5 carriers, I think the Zuiho is okay. She, you know, her hand capacity is okay, her planes are okay, she has some decent strike potential. Although, again, in ranked battles, I do see her struggling against, let's say, a fighter Bogue. I do see her struggling with a fighter Bogue. However, I feel like if you play the Zuiho correctly and you use her very nice stealth to get close to the front lines, you might be able to prevent the Bogue from really, let's say, intercepting your planes while getting sort of strikes off very, very close to front lines, and just doing these really sort of small area controls instead of trying to control the whole map. I think the Zuiho is going to be okay, but still at times situational, so I put her at the B tiers. Moving on to C tier ships, and I know this is going to be somewhat controversial, as some people are going to go, oh, you hate the German ships. No, not necessarily. I just am not a big fan of the Nurnberg or the Konigsberg in ranked battles. And there is a particular reason for that. One, if they try to bring all their firepower to bear, they have very little armor. So New Mexico, Fuso, any battleship really looks at you the wrong way, and you could just get instantaneously one shot. Armor is just absolute paper on these ships. But the sort of the big reason I don't really like the Nurnberg and the Konigsberg is because both of them have the 2 turrets on the rear, which sort of promotes more of the kiting, running away sort of playstyle. And with a lot of rank battles, you don't want your ships to be running away all the time, especially when there's objectives to be capped and fought over. So for me, the Nuremberg and the Konigsberg both have this fault where, again, in random battles, it doesn't matter. You can run away and kite all day long, and that's okay, because it doesn't really matter what you do sometimes. In ranked, where there are certain things that you have to do, the Nuremberg and the Konigsberg just aren't that good at doing those things. They do have phenomenal rate of fire, yes. They do have pretty good AP damage and everything, and their range is really good. It's just, I feel like other ships, for example, like the Kirov, can do the job better and with a little bit more flexibility because their turrets are in the front. And of course, then we have the trash tiers, and there's only really 2 ships I'll put in the trash tier. Mutsuki is one of those I feel like is definitely trash tier. You're not going to be using those guns much. The torpedo tubes reload really slowly, so she's just really I mean, if there's another destroyer like you know, the Minekaze, for example, if you're playing the Japanese line, they will likely do better than the Mutsuki. I just don't really like the ship at all. And then of course finally we have, oh, what was the last thing? Oh yeah, the Bogue. Okay, so Bogue, you know, air superiority configuration, it is very good. She does have the ability to control the air, and in that sense she's fine. My big problem with the Bogue is 60.5 knot speed. You're never keeping up with your team, and really if another destroyer just happens to slip by and catch up to you from behind, if the map is small, you're finished. You just can never run away from them. So for me, the Bogue is just one of those ships ideally you wouldn't take in. Again, still I'm saying if you do take it in, use the air superiority, because at least you're going to be able to take air for your team and, you know, keep the other team unable to spot your destroyers and things like that. So Bogue, trash tier, but if you have to play her, play air superiority and you'll be fine. And that pretty much covers all the tier 5 and 6 ships. Hopefully, you know, this will help you get through the lower ranks really, really quickly and get up to rank 15, or you play with the big boys and end up playing with the tier 6 and 7 ships, in which case consult the previous video. Anyways, folks, sorry about the issues with me screwing this one up, but, you know, hope you all have a good one, and good luck in ranked as always. Take care, and I'll talk to all of you again soon.